Hello everyone, welcome to an interesting chapter and also an important chapter from both the inorganic chemistry point of view as well as the general chemistry perspective, which is the periodic classification of elements or the periodic table. Now, as we know in this chapter, what we are going to be covering is how we will look at structured classification of elements into what we call as groups, where the elements that will belong to a group will have broadly similar characteristics in terms of their chemical properties and also to a large extent the physical properties. But we'll begin with how this understanding of the elements has started, because like everything happens in science, the elements themselves were not discovered in one day. So it has taken centuries for the elements to get discovered, and also for people, the understanding of the elements also has improved over a period of time. Because if you look at, in the original days, the idea of elements itself was not established. So when the initial understanding of chemistry was coming to the light, the difference between what is an element and what is a compound, it has taken a lot of time for people to understand this. And then came the purpose of studying the properties of the elements. So the properties, whether we talk about the physical properties or the chemical properties, okay, so properties of elements is the next thing that people have come to. And this is attributed to the commercial and other uses that people were able to see because of the chemical substances. So we'll talk about it, how all these things have happened. But we will first begin with how all this has started. So what is the genesis? So if you look at the genesis of chemistry, people might even call it as the the king of the science branches, for a simple reason that the quest for one of the not so popular uh, parts of chemistry, which is the alchemy, is a main reason for the advancement in terms of the understanding of chemistry. Because of the commercial importance of some chemical substances, like say for example gold, there is a philosophy that is being prevalent across different parts of the world, okay, whether it is Europe or even Africa and even some parts of Asia, like China, that we will be able to have uh, process where anything can be converted into, say for example gold. Like materials can be converted from one form to another form by some means. Okay, so the quest was to find what is the means to convert them. And the reason obviously is the preciousness of the gold, because the higher value of gold that it has, people want to convert everything into gold. And there came the idea of the philosopher's stone, and so on and so forth. So people started looking for understanding of the substances, chemical substances. The idea of element was not still clear to people, so they were looking at chemical substances. Even fire was considered as a chemical substance, air. So the use of the word chemical substance is not probably adequate back then, but they were calling them as substances. Lead is considered as substance, iron is considered as substance, water is considered as substance, okay, salt is considered as substance, and so on. Even the earthy matter is considered as substance, silver, sulfur, okay. So the concept of how we can convert one chemical substance into another form, this is the quest that people have begun. And while they were making a lot of attempts to do this, there was no success. Obviously they couldn't have success, because if they would have had success means then we would be studying a different chemistry altogether. So they didn't have success. And then they started looking for what exactly is the reason, so why we are not able to convert one chemical substance into another. And that quest has led to the understanding of the chemical substances, which evolved into the concept of elements over a period of time. and so on and so forth. The entire branch of chemistry has evolved in that manner. Even some very popular scientists like Isaac Newton, he himself has spent considerable amount of time on the alchemy. Maybe if you have some time, you can just go and check. There is a video on YouTube. I think it's a BBC documentary, The Dark Secrets of Newton's Life or something. That's the title. Okay, so you will find some interesting things on how he has spent time on looking at this studies on alchemy. So what you see on the right side is basically one of the you know emblem, or the symbols that basically represents this alchemy. And over a period of time, right, this has become I mean, this is I mean a very popular study in those days, but over a period of time it has lost its shine, and people started dissociating themselves with this. Okay, so it is not considered as a go-to research area in terms of time over a period. Okay, but this is one of the very beginning of how people started looking at understanding of the chemical substances. And if you look at today where we are from then, so today we are looking at around probably 117 elements, at least the elements that are available on the surface of the earth. I mean, we may have different set of elements on some other planets. In some part of a different solar system, we may have even more different elements. Okay, so what we have is roughly around 117 elements. Even there have been talks of discovery of new elements as recently as last year also. But the point is still there are questions on the existence of some of the so-called discovered elements. That is why if you look at in the bottom of the periodic table, which we will see later, I think in the modern periodic table you will see that some of these elements still were not given a proper name. They still have this name that is given based upon the nomenclature rules, like you will see that UUN, something like that. So why we have still not given the appropriate naming is because partly the existence of these elements is still in question. Okay, so when we look at the entire set of elements that are available today, the study of these elements is of course what we do in chemistry. So when we want to study the elements, what we're talking about is basically the properties of the elements. Properties means we look at both the physical properties as well as the chemical properties. And this is where the importance of the classification comes, because we obviously cannot have 117 chapters, because if you start having one chapter for each element, right, like we'll have hydrogen one chapter, we'll have helium one chapter, we'll have lithium one chapter, we'll have beryllium one chapter, like that we can have, I mean, 117 chapters. And probably it continues. We should probably, every time a new element is discovered, we should print our textbooks again. So this is not how we do it. So we have a simple way of covering all these elements where we will look at the groups of elements which have similar properties. And the very purpose of this grouping is also to make the study of chemistry simple. So if you look at the understanding of elements, right, in terms of the physical and chemical properties, it is being made simple because of this classification. So while we have over a period of time got newer and newer elements being discovered, what we have also been doing is try and classify these elements into groups. Okay, so there will be multiple attempts we'll cover in this discussion. There will be multiple attempts to find out what are the similarities in physical and chemical properties of the elements, and accordingly group them. So when we group them together, right, we don't need to study about, like today, if we assume that we have some understanding of the modern periodic table based classification. So we know that lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, francium, all are what the group 1 elements. So we also call them as alkali metals. Okay, so these elements, right, we don't need to study separately about lithium or sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium. Francium of course is radioactive, we don't study much about it. But if we get an understanding of, say for example, what will be the properties of oxides of sodium, then oxides of lithium, oxides of potassium, oxides of rubidium, oxides of cesium, they would tend to show almost similar characteristics. Maybe there can be some minor variations. We'll study about that also. In a group also we'll have some small variations, okay. But broadly, when we look at the properties, right, they would be coming almost similar. So this would ease out our study of the elements. And this, has again not happened in one shot. It has taken multiple attempts by different people to look at the classification of the elements, okay. And the main objective of the classification is what? To simplify the study of the elements. That is the main purpose or the objective. So if you look at the early classification attempts, so Lavoisier, it's a very popular name for the chemistry student, Antoine Lavoisier. He classified the elements. At the time, there has been a talk of around 33 elements that were available, and he basically grouped them into mainly 4 categories. So what he put as gases, metals, non-metals, and earths. So here the important point that we need to keep in mind is the so-called elements that he has categorized. By the way, Antoine Lavoisier is a French scientist. The so-called elements that he has categorized are not the elements that we think of today. Because when we talk about elements, right? So what is an element? For us, hydrogen is an element, carbon is an element, nitrogen is an element. Okay, but we don't call, say for example, the boric acid as an element. We don't call the heat as an element. We don't call light as an element. So the understanding of the chemical substances during the classification that is done by the Lavoisier was not very thorough, so to say. Okay, so what we have today at that point of time, that kind of understanding was not there. So if you look at it, right, so what is there in gases category? They've looked at light, heat, okay, and dephlogisticated gas and phlogisticated gas. So dephlogisticated air and phlogisticated gas, okay. So phlogisticated basically means so when we look at any gas that can produce fire, so people thought that there is actually a substance which is able to give rise to this fire, okay. So and that's why the phlogisticated gas basically means this gas can actually give fire. Dephlogisticated gas air means the air from which fire is already being produced, okay. So this is the kind of an understanding. You can see how not to call it as a primitive, but the understanding of the elements at that point of time was not as thorough as what we have today. And even if you look at the metals, right, so we have antimony, silver, arsenic, bismuth, cobalt, okay, copper, tin, and so on. When it comes to non-metals, if you can observe, right, yes, sulfur, phosphorus, they are fine, but you look at pure charcoal, radical of muriatic. So muriatic acid is basically hydrochloric acid. I mean, that is these are all the some of them are French names actually, okay. And boracic. So boracic is boric acid. So radicals from the respective acids. So like the radical coming from the boric acid, radical coming from the hydrochloric acid, okay. So that is how the understanding of the non-metals was prevalent. Then we have, of course, earths, the substances that are obtained from the earth, okay. So chalk or magnesia or clay. So the classification of the elements that were available at that point of time, of course, the understanding of the elements is not very thorough itself, but he made the first attempt to categorize them into these 4 basic categories. What are these 4 categories? We have gases, we have metals, we have non-metals, and we have earths, okay. And after some time, the understanding of the elements to people was getting more and more clear, okay. And as we can see in this classification, right, so not all these are actually elements. Some of them are compounds, and some of them do not even have any chemical significance. Like when we talk about heat, we know it is what? It is a form of energy, okay. But as time has progressed, people were able to get rather a better understanding of the elements. And the first structured attempt, so to say, was made by Dobryner. So Dobryner at the time there were around again 35 odd elements that were available at that point of time, and it was progressing. Okay, so what Dobrynin observed was that when he looked at the elements, he was able to see groups of three elements which have similar properties. That's why he called them as triads. So what he observed is that there are these sets of three elements which have similar properties, like lithium, sodium, potassium. He was able to put into one triad. Calcium, strontium, barium, chlorine, bromine, iodine, sulfur, selenium, and tellurium, and even phosphorus, arsenic, and antimony. So he was able to look at these groups of three elements which have similar properties. Not just that, there is one more thing that he was able to observe. That is, if you look at these triads, the atomic weight, because by the time the idea of atomic number, atomic number has come much later. Even after the Mendeleev table, the idea of atomic number has come. Okay, so the atomic weight of the middle element in the triad is the arithmetic mean of atomic weights of the other two elements. Like, say for example, if you look at the first triad here, right, lithium, sodium, potassium. So the lithium and potassium, if you take an average, 7 plus 39 by 2 is what? 23. And calcium, strontium, barium. Calcium 40, barium is what? 137. 40 plus 137 by 2 is 88.5. Approximately strontium atomic mass or atomic weight. Okay, so one thing, probably in basic concepts of chemistry, we'll again touch it. In physics, when you say weight, so we'll talk about weight as the gravitational force acting on the object, and mass is a physical quantity associated with the substance. It is a fundamental property of matter. But in chemistry, right, we don't differentiate. Like when we say weight also, we'll still give the value in terms of what? Mass. Okay, so that's the reason why you will see people using atomic weight or atomic mass. Okay, now coming to the third triad, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. So chlorine atomic weight is 35.5, iodine 127. Take an average, it will be close to bromine. Sulfur, selenium, and tellurium. Sulfur is 32, tellurium is 127.6. Take an average. Arithmetic average means what? Sulfur atomic weight plus tellurium atomic weight divided by 2. That will be coming close to what? 79.8. This is the atomic weight, approximately the value of atomic weight of selenium. So these are the two attributes that he was able to assign for the elements to be put into the triads. Now the problem with the triads is that not all the elements that were available at that time, because if you look at the 5 triads, right, totally what are we having? We are having 15 elements being covered. So there were elements that were not getting classified into the triads. Obviously we know the reason, because if you look at it from our understanding of the groups based on the modern periodic table, we should have at least 3 elements of one group being discovered at that point of time. If the 3 elements are not being discovered, means what? You will obviously not be able to form a triad. Like, say if you look at the first group, what are the things we have? Lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, and francium. If we have at least 3 elements being discovered, right, then we will be able to categorize them into triad. Of course, that is not the only condition. He put one more condition. What is the second condition? The second condition for the elements to be categorized into triad is what? That the average atomic mass of the first and third element should be equal to the atomic mass of the middle element. Okay, so the two conditions are what? First, the 3 elements in the triad should have similar properties. That is first. Okay, second is the atomic mass of the middle element is the arithmetic mean. Arithmetic mean means what? Average. Arithmetic mean of atomic weights of the first and third elements. Okay, these are the 2 criteria. Only when the elements satisfy the criteria, they can be put into the Dobrynin triad. Because we can have questions like this. They will give you which of the following elements will be classified as Dobrynin triad, like that. If you remember, usually what they do in these kind of questions is they will give us one of these 5 triads. Okay, lithium, sodium, potassium, or calcium, strontium, barium, or chlorine, bromine, iodine, or sulfur, selenium, and tellurium, or phosphorus, arsenic and antimony. They will give us one of these triads, and they will keep other three options as different sets. Okay, and then they will ask us which of them will be dopamine triad, like that. Okay, or sometimes they might ask which of them will not be. So if at all we are getting question on this, it will be like that. So the two things that we should keep in mind is what, the set which we are calling as the dopamine triad. First thing is what, they should have similar properties. These are the two conditions. Second condition is what, the atomic weight rule. So we can say it as what, atomic weight rule. What is the atomic weight rule? The atomic weight of the middle element is the arithmetic mean of the atomic weights of the other two elements. Okay, now the drawback with the Dobereiner triads is that this is not exhaustive classification. Why? Because he was not able to cover all the elements that were available at the time. So not all the elements that were available could be arranged into triads. What is the reason? The reason is obvious, because at least if you find three elements having similar properties, we can talk about forming a triad. In that also there is a small complication. What is it? This average atomic weight rule. Okay, so this is the drawback of the Dobereiner triad. And the next attempt is made by the scientist Newland, who came up with a law, because Dobereiner was just looking at sets of elements having similar properties. There was no law as such. So Newland, he came up with a law where he said that when the elements are arranged in the increasing order of the atomic weight, so we see that there will be a repetition of properties. How? The properties of every eighth element are similar to that of the first one, like what we observe in the musical notes. Okay, so what happens in musical note? After we have sa re ga ma pa da ni, again sa will come. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. So eighth and first note will be what? Same in musical notes. Similarly, in the case of the Newland's octave law, which is based on the concept of octave, that's why the name also is given as the Newland's octave law. Every eighth element, when you arrange the elements in the increasing order of the atomic weight, every eighth element will have the same properties as the first element, like that. So which means the table, as you can see over here, lithium will have similar properties to sodium. Then again, so if you start from sodium, let's say 1 2, okay, so here, okay, so we'll put it here 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Next eighth element is what? Potassium. So sodium and potassium will have the similar properties, like that. Okay, so if you start from any element, okay, the eighth element that is going to come as per the increasing order of the atomic weight is going to have the same properties. So this is what is the Newland's law of octaves. Even, I mean, the hydrogen was there at that point of time. So if you put hydrogen as well before lithium, because the noble gases were not yet discovered. Noble gases in fact were discovered after the Mendeleev table is proposed. Okay, so if you look at the hydrogen which is going to be kept in front of lithium, what you would see is that I mean, if you start from hydrogen, right, so 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. So we'll see that the hydrogen will have similar properties to that of the fluorine, and the eighth one that will come after fluorine is what? Chlorine, and so on. So in this categorization, right, one of the progressive things that has happened from the previous attempt is that here in the Newland's arrangement, there is a basis on which these elements were actually arranged. So the basis is what? The basis is the increasing order of the atomic weight. So Newland's rule assumes that if you have the elements arranged in the increasing order of atomic weight, every eighth element will have the same properties as the first element. Okay, but there were some drawbacks. The drawbacks were this rule, the law of octaves itself, right, was not being satisfied after calcium. So calcium will have atomic weight of 40 after calcium, right? This Newland's law of octaves was not being satisfied. And if you look at it from the current understanding of the elements, because after calcium, what will be coming is the D block elements. So we'll come to know about it when we go to the modern periodic table. What we call as the repetition of properties, right, which is given by the periodicity. So the repetition of property, the interval of repetition of property is called as what? Periodicity. So initially we'll see that the periodicity will be 8, okay, and then the periodicity will be increasing up to 18. So we'll see that when we go to the modern periodic table. But after calcium, basically what? This law of octaves was not holding true. Okay, so this is one of the major drawback. And the other drawback is that this Newlands table is in a way not complete because the inert gases were still not discovered at the point of time. So these are the drawbacks associated with the Newlands attempt. But again, the main thing is what? The law itself was failing after calcium. That is the main drawback with this, because only when we see that there is a clear drawback like this, there would be alternative attempts by the other scientists. Okay, and such an attempt is made by Lothar Meyer. So Lothar Meyer, what he did is he looked at the correlation between the atomic volume and atomic weight. So we know atomic mass or atomic weight, but how do we get the atomic volume? So atomic volume, so he obtained atomic volume of the elements by taking the ratio of atomic mass to the density of the respective substance. So that is how we got the atomic volume. So he basically plotted. Okay, so Dobrynin was sets of 3 3, Newlands table, and Lothar Meyer he plotted. It's a curve. Okay, so this is what we call as a Lothar Meyer curve. Okay, Lothar Meyer curve basically plots the elements with the atomic mass represented on the x-axis, corresponding atomic volume represented on the y-axis. This is how the plot is created. And when we look at this plot, so we can see, we would not be able to give explanation as to why the elements are appearing in a particular place in this curve, but we will be able to draw the inferences. In fact, what he did also is he was able to draw the inferences, okay, draw conclusions from this curve. So if you see, we have lithium, then beryllium, then carbon, then sodium, magnesium, aluminum, and so on. Based upon the curve that he has plotted, this is the conclusion that he has come to. The elements that have similar properties are going to be in same position of the curve. Same position means what? Like say for example, if you look at alkali metals is a name that has come little later. Okay, but alkali metals today, what do we call as alkali metals? The elements of the first group, which are lithium, sodium. We can see all lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium. Francium of course is radioactive, that is why this is not studied much. So all of them are appearing at the peaks. You can see all of them are where? Peaks. Alkaline earth metals, they are coming at the descending part of the curve. You can see, beryllium. So from the peak when you're descending, right? Magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium, they will come at the descending part. Halogens are at the ascending part of the curve. You can see, iodine, bromine, chlorine, they will be at the ascending part of the curve. And the transition elements are what we call as the D block elements. Okay, they will be lying at the broad minimas of the curve. So if you see maxima are basically what? The peaks or the maxima, they are sharp. But the minima, bottom, you see, this is a broad one. You don't just have one element, you have like many elements sitting at the broad minima. That is why the word broad minima is used. Because here you don't have one element, you have many number of elements which are at the minima. But maxima peak is what? Only one element, which is the alkali metals. So you see all these molybdenum, cadmium, or copper, cobalt, zinc, iron, all of them are at the broad minimas of the curve. Okay, and what we see is the physical properties, just like the chemical properties, right? They also change in a periodic manner. So when we look at the properties of the elements, not just the chemical properties but the physical properties of the elements, like atomic volume, density, and so on and so forth, right? All of them also they will be changing in a periodic manner. So if you talk about, as we can see here, the atomic volumes of all the peaks are what? They are the highest. Okay, and we see that there is a periodicity, right? So after we have a peak, then we'll go to minima, and then we'll again come to peak, then we'll go to minima, and then again come to peak. Okay, so Lothar-Meyer understanding of the periodicity of properties is not just limited to the chemical properties. It is also inclusive of what? Physical properties. Okay, now the understanding of the elements from the Lothar-Meyer curve, or the understanding of the periodicity in the properties of the elements, is supposed to be based on the atomic weight. So as we can see, how are we plotting these elements? What is the basis of plot on the x-axis? It is the atomic mass. So based on the Lothar-Meyer curve, what he was able to propose is that the physical properties of elements, right, they will be periodic functions of their atomic weights. So after certain period, you will be having a repetition. After certain period, you will be having a repetition. So we'll have sodium, then after certain period you will have again potassium coming. After some period you will have rubidium coming. After some period you will be having cesium coming. So the properties of elements, not just the chemical properties, but the physical properties also will be varying with period when we arrange the elements based on the atomic weights. But the thing is, Newland committed to the value of the period. He said the period value is what? 7, which means the first element and the 8th element will have similar properties. But Lothar-Meyer curve, they didn't comment on what is the period. So the understanding is that it is just going to be periodic function of the atomic weight. So what is the value of the period and how it is going to change, that is not being commented upon. So this is about the Lothar-Meyer curve. And at the same time, right, during the same time of Lothar-Meyer attempt, there was an another attempt by a Russian scientist, which has got probably more recognition than the Lothar-Meyer attempt, and he also has taken the classification as based on the atomic weight, but he came up with a tabular arrangement of the elements, and that scientist is none other than Dmitry Mendeleev. And we'll talk about the Mendeleev table because that's a little bit more detailed study that we are going to do, and this is what we have in the early classifications. So we are not going to keep the Mendeleev table in the early classification because Mendeleev was in fact been awarded Nobel Prize for the period table that he has come up with, and the scientists at that point of time, they have considered it as the greatest thing that has happened in terms of the discoveries in chemistry, because it has put to rest all the questions that people had in terms of the classification. At least that is what is the thought of. But like it always happens, after a while people started finding some faults with the, we don't call it as fault, because if there is anything rather not appropriate with any theory or any explanation that is given by a scientist, we would say there are drawbacks or shortcomings. We would not say it is fault or it is wrong. Okay, so that is a way in which we will try to honor these people for their attempt. Okay, so the so-called greatest innovation in chemistry also had some drawbacks, and then the concept of atomic number and the understanding of the properties to be related to more of atomic number has come, which is the basis of the modern periodic table. And then came the modern periodic table, and that is how we are having our the final form of the table today, which we use for the analysis of the properties of the elements. But this is what we have in the early classification. So early classification, what all we have? We have the alchemy, that is the beginning. That is the quest which has led to the discovery of more substances. Then the Lavoisier classification. Then we have the Dobrynin triad arrangement. Then we have Newland law of octaves. Then the Lothar-Meyer curve. Okay, so we look at a question that is based on the Dobrynin triad. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Okay, so look at this question. The law of triads is applicable to a group of. So here you can see the options, right? What are the options? Chlorine, bromine, iodine, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, sodium, potassium, rubidium, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. So as I said, in these type of questions, right, one of them they will give us the tride itself. Like, remember what are the trides? Trides are what? Lithium, sodium, potassium, chlorine, bromine, iodine. This is actually one of the trides as per the Dobrynin classification, isn't it? So if you are able to remember these five trides, then we will be able to straight away take the answer. What is the answer? The answer is chlorine, bromine, and then iodine. That is the Dobrynin tride in the given options. But otherwise, right, we can also attempt this if we remember the atomic weights of the elements. Okay, but again, we can probably remember only the atomic weights of some elements and not everything. So the better option would be that we'll remember these Dobrynin trides. But otherwise, look at it. There are two rules for the classification of elements into Dobrynin trides. What are those? First is the three elements which we talk of should have similar properties. They should be having similar properties. Now the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, we know based on our understanding of the modern periodic table, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, they don't come in a group. They actually come in a period. So carbon, then nitrogen, then oxygen, which means what? This cannot be a Dobrynin tride. Because the first criteria is what? They should have similar properties. Again, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, they also will not have similar properties. So they don't satisfy our first condition itself. Now chlorine, bromine, iodine, it satisfies because they are all in the same group. Sodium, potassium, rubidium, they also satisfy because they are also in the same group. But we have a second condition. What is second condition? The average atomic weight condition. This is second condition, right? What is the average atomic weight rule? The atomic weight of the middle element is the arithmetic mean of the atomic weights of the other two elements. That is the second rule that the tride should satisfy. Now if you look at it, right, the atomic weight of bromine is bromine is that average value of the atomic weights of chlorine and then iodine. So if you look at the values, right, so bromine it is 80, chlorine it is 35.5, and iodine it is what? 123. So if you take an average, means it will be what? 35.5 plus 123 divided by 2. Okay, so this will be, so what is it going to be? So 35.5 plus 123 means what it will be? 158.5 divided by 2. Approximately it will be what? 79 something will come, but approximately it is close to the 80 value. So they are satisfied. They will have similar properties and they also satisfy the average atomic weight rule. And we also know that this is one of the set of elements in the Dobrynin trides. But what about the sodium, potassium, rubidium? Remember that triad that we have in the first group is not sodium, potassium, rubidium. What is it? Lithium, sodium, potassium. Okay. So sodium, potassium, rubidium, right? Rubidium, what is the atomic weight? 85.5 and sodium 23. So if you look at the average value, 23 plus 85.5 by 2, what is it? This is 108.5 divided by 2. That will come somewhere around 54.25. So which is not the atomic weight of potassium. So the average atomic weight rule is what? The atomic weight of the middle element should be the average arithmetic mean or average of the first and third elements. That is not satisfied in the case of the sodium, potassium, rubidium. That will be satisfied in lithium, sodium, potassium case. Okay, so lithium is what? Lithium will be able to satisfy this, and that's why we have it as a tride also. So what is the correct answer for this? It is option A, which is chlorine, bromine, and then iodine. So if you remember these five trides, then we will be able to answer any question based on the Dobrynin tride. Otherwise, we should remember the atomic weights of most common elements, so that when they give a question, means usually they will give it on most common elements. So hence we will be able to conclude. Okay, so this is about the early classifications or the early classification attempts that have been made by the people. And as we said that almost in the same time as that of the Lothar Meyer, Mendeleev also came up with an attempt of his own, where he was able to arrange the elements in a tabular form based on a law that he proposed, which we call as the Mendeleev law. And Mendeleev law is also based upon the atomic weight. Both Lothar-Meyer curve and Mandleef law are based upon the atomic weight. Okay, so we'll talk about the Mandleef law in the next video.